This is Richmond's Morning News on News Radio WRVA.
All right, good morning, everybody. 7:33 here on News Radio WRVA. My name is Rich Schreier. Thanks for joining us for Richmond's Morning News. A viral video was picked up by local television. Lots of people have lots of things to say about what Henrico County Supervisor Misty Roundtree had in a now viral social media post. We played you some of her comments, and now we'll talk to her about it. She's joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. Let's welcome on Supervisor Misty Roundtree, our guest here on News Radio WRVA. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. One of our text messages came in that said this morning, I just wanted to know, what was the purpose of your original post? You said you weren't fear-mongering, raising awareness. What specifically did you want residents to understand when you share that message?
Well, I stated it in the video. As a representative of the district, I think that one thing constituents have made clear is they want communication from leadership, whatever the subject is, whatever party the representative is from. Folks just want communication from leadership. And so, when I am hearing reports about activity that's going on allegedly in my district, I think it would be odd, for lack of a better way to put it, for me not to respond in some way to at least, one, acknowledge that I have heard those reports. It's no different with anything that happens in Henrico or the district. I think folks want to know, is my representative informed, aware, and, on top of what's going on? So part of it was saying, literally, what I said in the video, I want to let you all know that I have heard these reports and I am looking into them. Another part of it was...
I'm sorry, let me jump in here with you. So was your goal to inform, warn, or advocate for something? So
to inform, and those were the words that I used essentially, were to make you aware that this is what's going on. The advocacy or guidance part of it came at a different part in the message. I have spoken with Police Chief English at various points just kind of throughout the past couple of months, wanting to make sure that I am in good communication with our local police and understanding what everybody's role is and whatnot. And so, he expressed the thought that we want to make sure that our residents know that Henrico Police is going to be, out there the way that they always are. And we want to make sure that folks are not confusing local police with ICE agents and potentially putting Henrico Police in situations that that they don't need to be in when they're going about their daily business. So that part of, guidance, for lack of a better way to put it, is to say, be aware that Henrico Police is going to be out there. The words I use, they are not your enemy in this, and, make sure that we're not jumping to conclusions about who is doing what.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. I want to follow up on one thing that you had said in there. You said that you heard ICE was going door to door. Now, you hadn't seen that in Henrico County, but we know that's going on in other places. Where exactly is that going on, and where does that statement come from?
That is coming from videos from other parts of the country. And I don't know why people seem to jump to the conclusion that I was talking about Henrico County, because I never implied that was happening in Henrico County.
You said that it wasn't Henrico County, but you said ICE is going door to door, which to me, that language can heighten the fear and the intensity and the emotions in your statement, and just rises the temperature when you say something like that, where it's not going on in Henrico County. And I think it's kind of disputed on whether they're going door to door, knocking on doors, looking for brown people.
Well, I believe it was J.D. Vance that said that, and heightened the fear of people, because I believe that those were his words, to say that that's the goal. We get our numbers up the way that we want them to for ICE hiring, and then they can start going door to door. And there are certainly videos of ICE agents going door to door, walking in communities, and making their presence, a scary thought. You talk about. It's ironic, I think, that folks are using my video as an example of fear-mongering, when it feels as though a lot of the actions taken by ICE are intentionally designed to create fear. When we have videos of, ICE agents saying to people that are not doing anything wrong, don't make a bad decision today. Didn't you learn from what's her name? And so I think that it's a bit of a twist, for for folks like me that are simply saying, here is, what we need to be aware of to be fear-mongering, when it really does feel like an intentional tactic of DHS and ICE right now to put fear in folks that if they don't act, a certain way or don't comply or don't what have you, that they are subject to loss of life.
Well, I mean, you do need to comply with a lawful order from a law enforcement officer.
Right.
Right.
But
so,
not at the face of a bullet in your face, right?
But again,
we have due process.
But ma'am, if you were to follow that, a chain of events starts when people don't follow a lawful order. Pull over, please. We can get into that a little bit later. But you brought something about the fear mongering, so I'm going to be completely transparent. My last name's Herrera. I'm Hispanic. I come from migrant farm worker stock, and I live right here. I don't feel threatened by ICE. So when you say everybody's in jeopardy, that doesn't reflect my lived experience. So how do you acknowledge a difference between my lived experience and not assuming that fear is universal? And what I'm saying is, I keep hearing, they're targeting these people and there's fear in the community. Ma'am, I'm part of this community and I don't feel any fear. So I want to know where that comes from, that we make the statement that this is causing fear in the community when I am right here. See ICE, do not fear ICE, do not fear Border Patrol. I don't know how valid that comment is.
I don't know what it is about your life, your history, your experiences that give you that level of comfort and feeling of insulation.
I'm an
that
American
you
citizen.
Are immune.
I'm an American citizen.
And there are plenty of American citizens that unfortunately have found themselves detained. The reality is that when due process and when rhyme or reason and when the structures that are supposed to protect folks like U.S. citizens or folks that are here on valid work documents are supposed to be protected from this type of activity are not, then I do think that those who conclude that they are insulated are doing so, frankly, at their own risk, because they're not taking the time to figure out these nuances of when we have folks that are being detained as they are going to their immigration check-ins and following the rules, there are no safe assumptions, I think, that used to apply.
Wait a second. So are you dismissing what I just said, that I'm Hispanic? I come from migrant farm workers. I've had many interactions with Border Patrol, and I don't live in fear of ICE. And I don't think I think a lot of people are assuming that happens where Hispanics, people that come from that community, live in fear of ICE. I just told you I don't, and I'm about as a prime example of that community.
Well, respectfully, the fact that you don't feel that fear does not negate that it's the reality for a lot of people. I'm brown myself. My mom immigrated from the Philippines. She's a naturalized citizen. I was born in the Philippines. I have some level of comfort and hope that because of things that I've accomplished in my life, perhaps I wouldn't be caught up in a dragnet, but I don't feel that I can safely make that assumption. And more importantly,
can you make that assumption? Can you make that assumption about? Can you make that assumption about others, that everybody feels this way, or is it just certain people feel that way?
This is not about necessarily what people feel. When I make the statement that those who perhaps do not have brown skin or those that do not speak with an accent should not feel that this is not an issue that doesn't affect them, right? And that's what that statement was geared towards, is when any of us are not protected by the rights that should be afforded to all of us, then it does endanger all of us, whether we think that we're safe in, the homes that we have because we don't look a certain way or talk a certain way. A threat to due process for one is a threat to due process for all.
But where are they being denied their due process?
They're being summarily detained, often held for long lengths of time without the procedures that are supposed to protect them.
Do you have an example of that?
Sir, this is all over the internet.
No, you're making this statement. You're making statements that are quote unquote all over the internet. Do you have the receipts for that? Because if that's happening, I'm going to stand here and yell and scream and carry on and point that out. I think I would agree with you if we had an example of that. I mean, you said that. Here's one of the other points you made. A judicial warrant is needed when ICE knocks on your door. You don't have to open the door if ICE has an ICE warrant. They look like warrants, but you need a judicial warrant. You're 100% correct in that, but is it misleading? Because if Henrico County showed up with an arrest warrant and they didn't have the judicial search warrant, they can knock on your door and not have to let them in either. It seems like you're belittling what an ICE warrant is and what it's not.
So I reject any false equivalency between ICE and Henrico police, and I think that that's an important distinction because the problem is that ICE has lost credibility in the enforcement of their role. And
in your opinion, or wait a minute, that's a big statement. In your opinion, or is there been a case law or something adjudicated, or a law has been passed, or something is gone through? Because that's your personal opinion. That's not a fact. That is a feeling that I think a vast majority of Americans feel right now, that when they're seeing ICE agents. As a Henrico County supervisor, and you're saying this officially as a Henrico County supervisor, are you saying that ICE is illegitimate and we're not paying attention to them? One, I would respectfully ask that you not continue to interrupt me. I agreed to be a guest on your show in good faith, and you are not allowing me to finish my answers. Finish. Thank you. I appreciate that. So it is visible to anybody that is actually receiving factual information. And I recognize, I take it face value. It was very clear from a lot of the folks in my comments that folks are being, siphoned information that is very limited. For example, I can't tell you how many people commented, well, what do you mean people that are not citizens are afforded due process? That's not true. And that is literally in the Constitution of the United States. But if your source of information is designed to, make you feel that that's not the case, then that's a problem there. Similarly, folks saying, well, only folks that are not U.S. citizens or folks that don't have any documentation are being detained, and that's not factual at all. And they're trying to blur the lines between detainments and deportations. If we equate it to regular criminal law, and as you know, I am a criminal defense attorney, anybody that is detained or arrested has rights that should apply to make sure that they're not unlawfully detained or held and that they have their day in court. And that is not what is happening with folks that are being swept up in dragnets. It is pick them up, sort them out later, and that's not the way that the law is supposed to operate, even in the context of immigration law. And again, these are civil offenses. These aren't even criminal charges. These are civil offenses. We saw in October of 2025 when they rappelled on helicopters on the building in Chicago. Not a single charge came from that against any of the people that were detained there. It was about the show of force. Okay, so I will agree with you that there are a lot of people that need to get the facts right. So you're 100% that everyone is afforded due process, period, of your immigration status. So there's one thing that you and I can agree on, ma'am. But I'll ask you this. You're right that we treat this civilly. We don't treat them as criminals. We don't use Section 81325, which makes it a misdemeanor to come across the border illegally. But would you agree with me that you have broken a federal statute, whether it's criminal or civil? You have broken U.S. code. You have broken U.S. law. And that's when you go into the civil proceedings for immigration, going before an immigration judge once they detain you, and then you go back into the system because everyone is here who doesn't have legal citizenship is technically on parole, whether you're waiting for asylum or you're trying to get through adjudicated your case. When you're under that parole, you can be detained by ICE officers, and they do an investigation, and that goes into the due process as you go through that court. I mean, you have broken U.S. code when you're here illegally, correct? Just as if I speed on 64, I've broken U.S. law, and I get a summons and I get a court date, and there is a process that flows from that. I'm not being detained on the side of the road and held in a jail cell until I get my court date on my traffic offense. But that is the analogy. That's the equivalent of what ICE is doing, is taking traffic tickets and treating them like armed robbery. No, ICE is following the due process that is according to the Immigration Nationality Act. When they detain you, they go back and then you go before that immigration judge, and they decide whether you're going to what's going to be adjudicated in your pending case. Those are two different things, ma'am. You're describing a process that should happen. What the problem is that process is intentionally not being followed, and I would argue it is for the show of saying we don't have to do it this way. If you listen to the rhetoric, and you don't seem like somebody that
you seem like somebody candidly that would probably be embarrassed by some of the rhetoric that is being put out by some of the social media posts that glorify and, put rock music like this is a video game to folks being detained and families being torn apart. You don't seem like that type of person that would celebrate that. But unfortunately, that is the messaging that is coming from the federal government. And to then wonder why people feel like this is topsy-turvy and crazy and against everything that this country is supposed to stand for, I think that is exactly what we would want law-abiding and decent people of our community to feel right now.
Well, I tell you what, I've enjoyed the conversation. I think there's one thing that we agree on is that we're not having enough conversations. I don't think people understand what the due process is and, more importantly, what it's not when it comes to immigration. And I appreciate you coming on the program. I'm sorry, we only have a couple minutes, so I didn't mean to cut you off. I want to be respectful, and I appreciate you coming on the program. I'd love to have you back on again because I think there's some things we agree on, and there's other things we'll have to agree to disagree on.
Sure. Anytime, Rich.
All right. Thank you so much. Misty Roundtree joining us here on News Radio WRVA.